In this short video, I want to talk about linear functions. So, a linear function has a form, well, there are two forms of a linear function. Mx plus b. X is the input variable, y is the output variable. M, this is called the slope. And it's given by y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, where the pair x1, y1 and the pair x2, y2 are both on the line. Now, what makes this a linear function is that regardless of the point x1, y1, and x2, y2, this is always going to be a constant. It's always going to be the same. And if it is not, then it's not a linear function. B, this is called the y-intercept. And in other words, B is when when x is equal to 0. There is something called the horizontal intercept. In other words, when y is equal to 0. And we'll talk about that in a later video here. So, what do some of these things mean? M. This actually tells you the direction. In a previous video, we talked about direction, increasing, decreasing. If M is positive, then the curve is increasing. If M is negative, then the curve is decreasing. If M is equal to 0, then it's neither increasing or decreasing, but it's just a horizontal line. What about the concavity of this? We had terms like concave up, concave down. Well, in a linear function, there is no concavity. There's no concave up, no concave down. In other words, the line is flat. I don't mean horizontal, but there's no curve to the line. So for this, there's the rate of change is constant. So in other words, there is no concavity. So here's a problem that I would like you to figure out on your own. Suppose I have a car, and I buy the car for a certain amount of money. The car depreciates. In other words, after 1 year, the car is $15,000. 2 years later, it's $13,000. 3 years, $11,000. 4 years after the date of purchase is $9,000. So I would like you to figure out the model for this particular depreciation and interpret the M and the B. In other words, the slope and the vertical intercept. Okay, so I hope you had enough time to look at this video. So I hope you had enough time to do this problem. So this is my take on it. So what I want to do is first figure out if this is actually a linear model that I'm going to be using. So the way I can do this is I'm going to look at these time intervals here. These time intervals, that has a difference of 1, that has a difference of 1, that has a difference of 1. Now I want to look at these differences. This is 2,000. This is also a difference of 2,000. In other words, 13,000 minus 11,000. And this last difference, 11,000 minus 9,000, that's also 2,000. What I have here is that if I look at this ratio, 2,000 divided by 1, that's the same as 2,000 divided by 1, 2,000 divided by 1. All of these are the same exact ratios. So therefore my model is going to be linear. So how do I figure out the slope of this thing? Well, it's a y2 minus y1 over an x2 minus x1. Now what are my x's and what are my y's? Well, these are going to be my inputs, so I'll label this with an x. And these are going to be my outputs. I'm going to label that with a y. So let's pick any two pairs here. So let's pick this particular pair and this pair. In other words, when x is 2 and x is 4. When x is 4, I get a y value of 9,000 and an x value of 4. When x is 2, I get 13,000 as my y value and 2 as my x value. So looking at this, 9,000 minus 13,000 is negative 4,000 divided by 2. Or simplifying, I get negative 2,000. So what does that mean? It means that for every one increase in year, I go up by 2,000. So when I start at 1 year and I go 1 year after that to a 2, I'm going to subtract 2,000 each time. That's what this means. So my m is going to be equal to negative 2,000. Now what about my b? Well, there's many ways to do this. One thing I can do is interpret what this negative 2,000 means. If I go backwards in time, instead of taking away, I'm going to add 2,000. So if I want to get to time 0, in other words, when x is 0, that's the b in the problem, I'm going to need a 17,000. So my model for this particular problem, and like I said, there are different ways to do this, is going to be equal to mx, that's negative 2,000x, plus b, 17,000. So I already talked about the interpretations of these. The negative 2,000, what does this mean? This means there's a $2,000 decrease. Notice I'm getting direction in here. For every 1 year increase. And the 17,000. This is the initial value of your car. Whoops. There's no E at the end of car. I hope this solution was helpful. sorry for the little mess up with the document camera. Here's a complete version of the solution. So here's a continuation of the previous problem. I would like you to provide the units for M and B and answer the question, in which year does the cost of the car reach 0? I've had enough time to think about the solutions for this. So how do we figure out the units for M? Well, M, what I do know is that it's a ratio of Y values and X values. Now, the units for the Y values, I know that's going to be dollars. And the unit for X, that's going to be years. So the units for M is going to be dollars per year. So this should make sense of what we were talking about in the previous solution. This negative 2,000, that's the decrease per year. It's negative $2,000 per year. That's why we go from 15 to 13 to 11 to 9 and 7 and 5,000. It's going to go $2,000 reduction per year. What about this one? What does it mean for the cost to be 0? Well, the cost of the car, I should say the value of the car, I should have actually put down value. Poorly worded question there. When is the Y equal to 0? So this is where I bring in a little bit of algebra. If the output is supposed to be 0, I need to figure out when the input achieves that. In other words, I have this equation I want to solve for X. So I can bring the 17,000 to the other side. And then divide by negative 2,000. And what does this get us? Negative 17,000 divided by negative 2,000, that's going to be a positive number. 17 divided by 2 is going to be 8.5. So it's going to take 8.5 years for the value of this car to reach 0. In which year does it? Well, my answer here is 8.5. But how do I answer this question? So the first year, this is a little technical here. My first year, I'm going to draw a little, my first year is between 0 and 1. My second year is between 1 and 2. My third year is between 2 and 3. So where does 8.5 sit? 8.5 sits between 8 and 9. So this is going to be my 9th year. In other words, I'm going to round this number up, and that's the year that I'm in. So my answer to my question, this particular question, it's the 9th year. I hope that solution was helpful.